Greetings everyone and welcome back. This is the third episode of the Bebop dominant scale for the 5-string banjo. And today this is an important lesson because we're going to get into how to practice what we've learned so far. It's a lot, it can be overwhelming, so we need to have some sort of system and guideline for practicing so we're not just spinning our wheels and going crazy. And I'm going to show you two methods. One is somewhat mechanical but necessary, and the other is much more fun. So what is the mechanical method? The mechanical method is to play these positions in the cycle of fourths. Now if you don't know what the cycle of fourths is, there's a lot of videos on YouTube. I recommend you go ahead and look one up. But if you know what the cycle of fourths is, you know that if you go the opposite direction, it's the cycle of fifths. So why don't we do the cycle of fifths? Well, you can, but since these are dominant seventh chords, they have tension, they want to resolve, they want to move usually to the fourth. So if we practice these in fourths, it gets our ear and our fingers trained to move to the fourth. So how does that work? So easiest to start with the root positions first, and you just run it through the cycle. Nice and slow though. Aim for clear notes. If you have a metronome, you can bring it out and use it to the metronome if you want. I'm not using a metronome here today, but if you have one, I do recommend it. So here's how that would sound on a root position, move through the cycle. And you notice it's the same position, the same fingerings, and they're closed positions, so they work anywhere as long as you know where the root is. So that is what's so valuable about the cycle of fourths and moving through it. It forces you to learn your banjo neck. You have to know where these root notes are on your banjo. All right, so here's how that would sound. G. Now C. F. B flat. E flat. A flat. D flat. G flat. B, E, A, D, and then back to G. Playing through the cycle with the root positions is fairly easy because the root note tells you what chord it is. But last lesson, we learned to start the scale on other chord tones, the third, the fifth, and the flat seventh. And when you start using those positions, it becomes a little more confusing because you have to stop and think, okay, I know where G is because that was in the lesson, but now we're moving to C on the cycle. Where's the third of C? And there's an easy way to get around that, a very handy way. Like if we take the first movable position from last lesson, we started on the third of G, which is B on the 4th-string 9th fret, and we did this shape. You see the ring finger where it is, it's on the 4th-string 9th fret. Well, we have our basic G inversion that every banjo player knows right there. And the ring finger is on the right spot to start the form. Now when we go to C, just make that chord up here for C, the same inversion but for C, and your ring finger is in the right spot to start the next shape. Now F is the next one, so find the F inversion. Again, your ring finger's right where it needs to be. I do recommend strumming the chord before you play the shape, just to get it in your head. So in other words, look for the basic chord form to ground you as to where you're at. Another example is we learned one starting on the 5th on the 4th string at the 12th fret. And we learned this last time. Well, there at the 12th fret, we have this G7 inversion that all banjo players know or should know. So now when we move to C, just move this chord inversion to C at the 17th fret or down at the 5th fret, whichever one you want. And that tells you exactly where you need to start on the 4th string there. So what we want to do is take all of the positions, the closed positions that we've learned so far through the first 2 episodes, and run it through the cycle of 4s, all of them. But I don't recommend you do them all at once or try to do that. It's too much. So just do 3 at a time through the cycle, and then practice whatever else you want. And then the next day, start where you left off, take another 3 until you get through all of the positions. And then start the cycle all over again for 3 different times. These mechanical exercises are not meant to be done, forever. They're there to give you facility and get your fingers used to the positions. But there'll be more stuff to learn, so it's not something you can do forever. But I say if you take it through 3 different times, all of the positions, that'll get you very well familiar with the positions and the scale. I also advise that you just do like 30-minute practice sessions and then get up and take a 5-minute break. Pace yourself. Of course, you can't do mechanical stuff forever, and that's where the fun side comes in. Technology is both a blessing and a curse, but one way that it's a blessing for us as musicians is to have MIDI backing tracks. These are fun, much more fun than a metronome to practice with. The one I use is called iReal Pro, and I'm not an affiliate of theirs at all. I just really like their app. You can get it for phones or tablets or your computer. And basically what it is you put in the chords and then you choose what kind of background you want, including bluegrass or salsa or jazz. And then you hit play and you got a jazz band accompanying you, bass, piano, and drums. And so what I like to do for practice is just to take 12 bars and put 1 chord in this case, G7. Hopefully you can see that. And then I hit play, and then I can just practice to my heart's content. I have it set to repeat 30 times. If it stops and I want to keep going, I just press play again, and I can practice all these scales over G7 to my heart's content and enjoy doing it because it has a feel to it. It has a bounce. It has a little bit of a drive. So that's the fun method. And it kind of sounds like this. So at a certain point, just running the scale up and down 1 chord, it has its purposes, but at some point you want to try plugging it into certain songs. And the way I suggest starting with that is to write yourself a simple 12-bar blues in G. So you have G7, C7, and D7, and you can practice the bebop dominant scale for each of those chords in a blues context, which gives you some structure and allows you to practice this, switching the scale within an actual song. Also, I suggest when you're running this scale over 1 chord, G7, is allow yourself some room to experiment and get creative. You know, if you hear something, if you hear a lick, or if you hear some sort of pattern that you want to pursue, and then go for it. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. It's already kind of running long, but it's an important topic, how to practice. I think this will give you a good foundation to begin. The next video, we're going to look at something called enclosures, which increases the chromatic capacity of this scale. See you then. Bye-bye.